Happy Tuesday to all of you. Welcome back to the Racing Roundtable. Nick Tammaro here, deputizing for Ashley Anderson, joined by two regular Roundtable guests, Vance Hanson and James Scully. Gentlemen, it was a loaded weekend of racing, mainly preps for the Breeders' Cup, which is now less than 4 weeks away. Things are getting awfully exciting. By the time we get ready to close the book on October, we'll also be shifting our focus out west to the Breeders' Cup. Let's dig right into some of this action and get after it. We're going to start by talking about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Division, which of course had a couple of headlining races, a trio of them on Saturday afternoon. And our conversation will begin with Ted Naufy, who won the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland, coming back really to validate a tremendous performance in the Hopeful at Saratoga. James, did you did it seem to you at least that Ted Naufy was as good as what we saw at Saratoga?
Yeah, I mean, considering he was going 2 turns, and that was a big question mark, I thought that he did it perfect. I thought he looked really good, and I was happy to see, his numbers on both the Briss and other scales that I saw came back pretty similar to that effort in the Hopeful. He didn't take a huge step back on any of them, and you can make the case pairing up similar numbers in those performances is a good formula for, then taking a step forward in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile potentially for Ted Naufy. So I came away impressed by his effort. It was 180 degrees different than his stablemate Tommy Joe, who really showed some limitations, I thought, in the Alcibiades the day before at the mile and a 16th distance. Ted Naufy passed it with flying colors, I thought, and it looks like he's set up for a good effort at Del Mar in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I will say that, that's been a really good prep as well, the Breeders' Futurity in recent years, and just having a 2-turn start, or at least a start at a mile or longer, is going to be an edge for him against the other horse that figures to compete for favoritism in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
Vance, what did you make of Ted Naufy all in all, and how much do you think it matters that he has that good tactical speed, that ability to race forwardly? After all, the last 2 juveniles at Del Mar both been won in wire-to-wire fashion by Bob Baffert trainees.
Yeah, I agree mostly with James's assessment of the Breeders' Futurity, and I do believe the tactical foot that he's shown in his career is going to be a huge asset, because if we remember those last couple of juveniles you mentioned at Del Mar, there were some horses that just kind of got out there and walked the dog, basically, and it'll be very important for him to stay close to the competition, especially if the pace gets a little dawdling on the day of the juvenile.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that stood out to me was that not only was he willing to keep the heat on litmus test, but when he was asked by John Velasquez, just inside of what would normally be the 5/16 pole as we're watching this replay, he went by litmus test pretty easily. And at that point, Blackout Time had really hit his best stride. Looked like he was going to be, to me at least, a bit more of a threat down the stretch, but Ted Naufy held him safe, I thought, very comfortably. This was a pretty complete effort, and I think, as James alluded to, with it being his first start around 2 turns, I thought he looked awfully good and looms one of the shorter-priced favorites on Breeders' Cup Friday, if not the shortest price, by probably a large margin. Well, let's have a little fun with a bit of a mini tale of the tape, looking at the main 2-year-old contenders for the juvenile right now. The horse, of course, that didn't run last weekend, that did win the Del Mar Futurity and will now go into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile off of a bit of a freshening, is Brand, the flashy 2-time winner for Bob Baffert, who, of course, as I mentioned before, has won the last 2 runnings of the Juvenile at Del Mar, winning with Corniche in 2021 and Citizen Bull last year in 2024. This was a situation, guys, where it feels like Brandt being away and Ted Naufy doing that good work last weekend, for a lot of people, is going to put Ted Naufy a pretty substantial margin ahead. Do you feel strongly that that's where they should be situated, Vance?
Maybe not so big of a gap. I mean, if you look at their speed figures, both of them have produced very good high numbers. Obviously, Ted Naufy's experience going 2 turns now kind of trumps Brandt, who will be running beyond 7 furlongs for the first time. But Brandt kind of had to overcome some of his own difficulties in the Del Mar Futurity, bumping soundly with a rival, leaving the gate, and then trying to lead gate to wire for the first time. That was kind of the opposite of his debut. So Brandt showed some quality in the Del Mar Futurity win, and from a speed numbers perspective, perspective, there's not much separating their peak performances from each other, so it should be a pretty interesting battle.
James, what do you make of? Of course, you're welcome to answer this question. And in addition, what do you make of some of the subsequent kind of lackluster performances by the horses that Brant beat in the Del Mar Futurity and last weekend's American Pharoah?
Well, I mean, Intrepido, he ran okay for Mike McCarthy. I thought that's right. Intrepido in the American Pharoah.
Yeah, he's Mullins. He was coming in off his maiden.
Or Mullins. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting that, Nick. The thing with Brandt, though, I mean, that horse had a lot. He's a $3 million purchase, and he had a big reputation before he made his career debut in late July. And that was a pretty tough maiden field he was in, and he was still odds on, and he wins it going away by open lengths. He's 1-9 in that Del Mar Futurity, so I don't think there's going to be a big gap. There's only been two horses that have won that I could find. Maybe I missed one that have won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile in its 40-plus year history without a race at a mile or longer. And that was Johannesburg, who shipped over in 01 and won for Aidan O'Brien, his lone win on the dirt in Breeders' Cup, and Bronco in 1993. And I think Bronco pretty much just laid over the field. I don't remember the Johannesburg race. I know that I think Officer was the big favorite in there and didn't fire, but I might have.
And DeHare was the big favorite in the
DeHare
Bronco.
was the big favorite.
He wound up bleeding in the race, I think.
Wound up bleeding in the race. Okay, I knew that race had a big favorite, and that horse did not fire a big effort. So I do think it's an advantage to have a race at a mile or longer. Pushing the Del Mar Futurity with the Breeders' Cup Juvenile being on October 31st. Bavert talked about it to September 7th, October 31st. It would only be 4 weeks to the American Pharoah and then 4 weeks to the race. And he wanted to give him a little bit more time between starts. But, it wouldn't be impossible for him to get out and just lead all the way, Nick. That's my take on Brandt. And if he's good enough, then, I think that lack of a race at a mile or longer won't stop him.
Yeah, we're not going to touch on the Champagne, but I'm pretty strongly of the opinion there's a horse in there that won in Napoleon Solo who might keep Brandt from being able to dance along on the front end. I will say that at this point, to me, I know their resumes are Ted Noffy's run 3 times, Brandt's run twice. Ted Noffy's won two grade ones, Brandt's won one. I think Ted Noffy is a substantially more accomplished horse, just having gone the 2 turns, having beaten some better competition, and I don't love the prospects of Brandt stretching out. I didn't really like how he looked going to 7/8. I don't like his action for a horse that is going to ultimately have to go more ground, and he's going to take a lot of heat doing so. Bob Baffert knows a heck of a lot more about winning Breeders' Cup Juveniles than I do, and so plenty of people are just going to go the in Bob we trust route, and I don't really blame them, but right now I do think of these 2 flashy, talented grays, I strongly prefer Ted Noffy, who, again, looms one of the stronger priced favorites, I think, on the Friday action. Let's talk about a Saturday Breeders' Cup race and a prep that took place for it on Sunday at Keeneland when Nitrogen missed by a pretty scant margin all in all into Spinster. This was a race that I think has 2 storylines, gentlemen, one of which is Nitrogen coming back and really validating that Alabama victory over 3-year-old fillies, facing elders in here. The other half, of course, of that conversation we'll hold off on for just a minute and focus on Nitrogen, who I didn't really think lost anything in defeat. James, did you think she did so?
No, I did not. Not at all. And I thought that Jin is just this filly that loves Keeneland. And she got out to an easy early lead, and that was the difference in the outcome, I thought, because Nitrogen did make a good run at her, came up just a little bit short. But to me, she's going to have an opportunity to run big in the distaff in California. Obviously, you got Cavallari and a couple other or at least one other Baffert Seismic Beauty that she'll have to beat, and I think Cavallari is going to be the horse that really takes a lot of money. But I think I don't think her stock took a hit at all, and in fact, the race is not going to be as deep as it was going to be. We thought, and we'll get to that.
Vance, how about you? Did you think Nitrogen still looms a main contender for the distaff?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, her stock didn't take a hit as far as champion 3-year-old filly is concerned. I mean, it was basically enhanced, running second in a grade one against older fillies and mares. But, she had really had every opportunity to pass Jin Jin here. And as James said, Jin Jin obviously loves Keeneland. She got out to an easy, comfortable lead. But, just the fact that she kind of drifted out here and still fell short. She was in front of a couple of strides past the wire, but still the fact that she lost kind of diminished her a little bit in my eyes. So I think she could go off kind of lower odds than she should perhaps in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She is the best 3-year-old filly in the race going into the race. She could run a really big one at Del Mar, and like I said at the beginning of my statements, I think her championship credentials are pretty much solidified here. But I wouldn't take too short a price on her in the Breeders' Cup Distaff.
Yeah, definitely the most talented 3-year-old filly, I would say, by a pretty substantial margin. And maybe the only thing that stands between her and division honors would be a win by Clico or one of the other 3-year-old fillies in the distaff. And boy, as soon as words come out of my mouth, it seems very unlikely.
Yeah, and even then, Nitrogen's record, top to bottom this year, I think pretty her consistency kind of trumps everybody else.
I do think Nitrogen's
Well,
effort, though, at a mile and a quarter, 2 starts back, and the fact that she's running a mile and an eighth is a benefit for her. I wonder a little bit about those Baffert Cavalieri. I mean, it's the mile and an eighth, mile and a 16th. I think she'd be the filly to beat in there. And I will say, 3-year-old fillies held their own in that race. 12 winners of the distaff, including last year, 3-year-old fillies.
Yeah, I get the feeling that later this month, when everybody gets acquainted with the PPs of the contenders in this race, they're going to realize that Seismic Beauty is probably the best horse nobody talks about. And she has run 2 gigantic races. She just doesn't run very often. But her Clement Hirsch, and I believe it was the Santa Margarita at Santa Anita, have both been sensational. And they were really fast. She's got a ton of speed. And yeah, I think the distaff field has a Seismic Beauty problem at this point. What I also want to discuss in this race, and again, we wanted to mainly concentrate the conversation on Nitrogen, was the disappointing performance by Torpedo Anna in the Spinster, which we'd grown accustomed to seeing her really just deliver every single time. And we've got some video of the race itself. Guys, I thought she got herself into a pretty customary early position. Looked like she was traveling pretty smoothly down the backstretch. And then there's about a half a second or so on the far turn where you see Flavien Prat's hands move and the tank is just empty. And I wonder in a way if the tank might be empty on Torpedo Anna's career. We've seen her bounce back from poor performances, but we've seen her do so with time. And time is not on her side at this point, as we're less now than a month away from the Breeders' Cup. Any chance she can rebound?
I don't think so. I think it's been a long season, and and I just think McPeak talked about it a little bit, where he said, "Hey, these horses, they can go off form," and he sort of hinted or suggested she'd gone off form in this Spinster, and not likely to get it back in 4 weeks later.
Vance?
Yeah, I look back to her performance in the Travers last year, which was completely awesome against Fierceness, and she earned a huge number that day, and one that she really never came close to replicating. And she had the benefit of running in one of the weaker Breeders' Cup distaffs in a long time last year to close out her campaign. The races she won at Oaklawn over the winter weren't dazzling by any stretch and weren't really grade 2, grade 1 quality races. So she has taken advantage of a lot of somewhat easier competition on the East Coast this year, winning a couple of grade 1 races. But this race kind of was kind of similar to what we saw in the La Troyenne. Even though she encountered a lot of trouble in the La Troyenne, you wouldn't have expected her to completely fold like she did, and nobody would have expected her to completely fold in this race either. So yeah, she's thrown in two really subpar efforts this year, and she's definitely not the filly that she was last year.
And it goes to show you how, crops change, groups of horses change. Torpedo Anna probably doesn't earn this superstar status if she's running regularly against the likes of, even recent horses like Songbird, Beholder, Forever Unbridled, a Monomoy Girl, Latruska. But she took care of business the majority of the time against what did line up in the gate with her. And obviously, it's been an admirable career, and she'll be honored at the Hall of Fame, I'm sure, in just a few years. If we see her again, great. I'm not anticipating it. But it should be a really interesting distaff nonetheless, with the 3-year-old fillies being such an evenly matched lot, maybe outside of nitrogen, in addition to some of those good older horses. Well, it is time for the what else portion of our conversation. Vance, I know you're going to take us on another international escapade. Let's go.
Yeah, a couple horses to mention that ran in Europe over the weekend, heading to the Breeders' Cup most likely. I'll start with Puerto Rico, a 2-year-old colt trained by Aidan O'Brien, who ran in the Prix Jean-Luc Lagardère at Longchamp on Sunday and won wire-to-wire fashion for his second career win. O'Brien has won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf the last 3 years, and the last 2 years he's won with horses coming out of the Jean-Luc Lagardère, and both were sired by Wooten Bassett. And Puerto Rico is also a son of Wooten Bassett. So we could have sons of the same recently deceased sire win the juvenile turf 3 years in a row. Now Puerto Rico took quite a few starts to get the handle of things. He was still a maiden in his 6th start, entering the Champagne Stakes at Doncaster last month. Wasn't a very deep renewal of that race, but he went wire to wire there, broke his maiden finally, and then he repeats this past Sunday at Longchamp, also in wire to wire fashion. So Puerto Rico looks like a horse that's just finally learning how things are going, and he's won 2 in a row, so he's going to enter the juvenile turf on a huge upswing. Potential favorite in the race too. So, but winning wire to wire might be difficult for him. We'll have to see what the rest of the field looks like, but he's a horse to keep an eye on. And then I'll also mention Cinderella's Dream, who we all remember last year was the beaten favorite in the filly and mare turf after not getting a very good trip during the race. Connections basically cut her back for most of this season's campaign, running her at a mile quite a bit. She's had a mixed record this year at a mile. She won the Falmouth Stakes at Newmarket in July, but she's also dropped several other starts, including this past Saturday's Sun Chariot at Newmarket. But I don't know if they kind of they were using this race more or less as a prep to stretch her back out to a mile and 3/8 at Del Mar. But the bottom line is that while she might not be as big of a contender this year as last year, at least she could offer some value. I mean, we know that she's going to run well. She's run well at Del Mar before. We know she can get a mile and 3/8. It's just that her form this year has been kind of clouded, running in races that perhaps weren't as long as she might have needed. So this is a much more contentious filly mare turf that we're looking at this year too. We have She Feels Pretty. Godolphin will also have a vastly improving filly named Diamond Run, who ran She Feels Pretty to a narrow margin in the E.P. Taylor. So those 2 fillies might be the ones to beat, but Cinderella's Dream will offer value, and I wouldn't be surprised if she stepped up her game a little bit more at the Breeders' Cup in a few weeks.
Cannot wait for this race to be run around two turns, each of the next 2 years at Keeneland and Belmont, respectively, returning to the distance it was meant for at or around a mile and a quarter. I am not a big mile and 3/8 around 3 turns fan. It's obviously not a race that we see anything remotely close to it in Europe. And I think it cannibalizes the turf, but nobody wants to hear my opinion on that. Nonetheless, we'll obviously be waiting to see Puerto Rico and Cinderella's Dream in the pre-entries in a couple of weeks. Thanks for that info, Vance. James, what about your what else?
Well, there were several nice 2-year-old maiden winners at Keeneland last week, including the Todd Pletcher trained debut winner, Local Knowledge, and the Wesley Ward trained debut winner, Heartily. But I'm going to focus on a 2-year-old filly, Bella Ballerina, that made her career debut for Godolphin and Brendan Walsh on Sunday afternoon. Didn't get away real sharply from the gate and rated like 6th early on. But when she was she makes a real strong move to the lead here in upper stretch with Tyler Gaffleon and draws off to win by more than 4 lengths in the end. Got a solid figure. This was her first start. She is out of Grade 1 winner, Pretty City Dancer. That makes her a sibling to Grade One or champion 3-year-old filly, Pretty Mischievous, and lots of Grade One winners in that family. Pretty City Dancer is a sibling to Grade One winner, so great female family. Real sharp performance at first asking from Bella Ballerina. I also want to mention that at Del Mar this weekend, Tamara returned, and this is a filly that was favored way back when in the 2023 Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. She ran only once last year in allowance race, ran second by a nose. And this was her first start since last November. It was in the Grade 3 Chillingsworth. She showed good tactical speed from the beginning, sitting up close, and then drew off to win by almost 4 lengths under Mike Smith and got a solid number for the effort. Mandela's going to take her right to the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, Tamara. And, I made a little mention, I remember in 2014, Secret Circle came back from a year layoff or more than a year layoff and got one prep in them and then really ran his race in the Breeders' Cup to win the sprint that year. Tamara's going to try to do the same in the Filly and Mare counterpart. And that was a good comebacker for her.
No doubt about it. Yeah, it certainly makes for an interesting conversation about the respective Spendthrift farm horses. It's been a good year so far for Spendthrift Farm, but I almost wonder, Mandela can't possibly run Tamara and Copian against each other, right? Could this mean that we're going to see Copian?
No, he is. I'm sorry, he is.
Okay.
He said he's going to. He said he's going to run him against each other, and he actually paid Tamara, the daughter of Beholder, the ultimate compliment, I thought, where he said, "I don't know which one's better," which seems a little dubious.
Between Tamara and Beholder.
But he did pay her a big compliment, I thought, because Copian has been dynamite this year. I know she's coming off a runner-up finish, the Sweet Azteca, but she's certainly capable of winning the Filly and Mare Sprint with her best effort.
So he was saying he doesn't know who's better between Tamara and Beholder.
No, Copian. I'm sorry. I was just saying Tamara.
I was going to say, because I definitely know who's better.
I left that out initially, and I added it again, and I got it all.
No, that's fair. I mean, I don't really think we've gotten Tamara's best, right? That's the whole question, and we've seen Copian's best. I think up to this point, it's pretty darn good. Anything you want to weigh in there on that, Vance?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to give the edge to Copian. Just based on recency and the kind of campaign that she's put together and the figures that she's run this year. But let's see what Papa Mandela does. He's had some brilliant Breeders' Cups in its history for sure.
No question about it. James acknowledged Pretty City Dancer as well, a horse that Norm Cassie touted endlessly when she was a 2-year-old filly in 2016. She was a Grade 1 winner as well. Dead heating in the Spinaway. Probably the last time I hit a good pick 5 was that day when she dead heated with Sweet Loretta. I will talk for my what else about what I think is coming up, one of the more interesting, fascinating, whatever adjective you want to use for it, races of the Breeders' Cup weekend, at least the dirt slate, the Juvenile Fillies, which is a race that really lacks a standout at this point. I think we were all waiting for Tommy Joe to maybe grab that mantle by the horns, and she didn't. She ran I don't want to call it a subpar race, but a slightly disappointing race relative to what we had seen in the Spinaway when she crossed the wire second in Friday's Alcibiades. Gentlemen, there's a lot that you can put into this. I'm of the opinion that they both run cleanly. I don't really think Tommy Joe was getting by Percy's Bar. I thought Percy's Bar was pretty much handridden into upper stretch. And I regret that Luan Machado made the decision he did to try and move her out a bit and potentially intimidate Tommy Joe. I suppose there's a world in which Tommy Joe was going to wear her down. I'd love to see a cleanly run stretch drive where I thought Percy's Bar took more of a step forward going to 2 turns than Tommy Joe did. And it leaves me wanting a little bit more from the favorite there and wondering if maybe the improved performance by a horse like Iron Orchard, improved only because it came against Open Company, and a solid 2-turn win by Explora in Saturday's Oakleaf makes this division just about as wide open as it could get. Am I off my rocker, Vance?
I don't think so, and I think that I think Luan Machado is a very talented rider, but I mean that's a mistake. I mean he cannot let his filly come out into Tommy Joe, because I agree with your initial assessment. I thought she was in the process of turning her back when she drifted out into her, and it completely cost her the race. I thought that Explora ran. I mean, listen, Explorer to me, I look at her bloodlines, and she's wasn't supposed to be this talented sprinter. I mean, she's bred to be a 2-turn router, and she just ran so fast in her debut at 5.5 furlongs. I make the case she bounced a little bit, running second next out in that Del Mar debutante. And she took a step forward, I thought, in the Oakley. I think she's poised to be a big favorite in the juvenile fillies. I think you make the argument she's eligible to keep moving forward off of it. Last year's juvenile fillies was not a good group. I mean, there were some Grade 1 winners with Scottish Lassie and Lacara, but none of those runners won their next race back. It wasn't as bad as the 2021 juvenile that Corniche won. That was the ultimate negative key race of key races. But we've seen some weak juvenile races, or not weak, but not the strongest additions.
What do you think, Vance?
Yeah, I agree with James's assessment of Explora. Really good performance, and Baffert said after the race that he really expected her to take a step forward, stretching out the 2 turns. So she looks like a slight favorite in the juvenile fillies going forward. Tommy Joe, I agree with you, Nick, that it was very questionable whether she would have gotten beyond the lead horse in the Alcibiades, even with a clean trip. It just didn't seem like she was traveling as well as she did winning the spin away. So I think a lot of bettors will probably give her the benefit of the doubt, perhaps, but she almost looks like a fade for me in the juvenile fillies if she gets a bet again out there.
I agree, and I think that's a good way for us to sum up our conversation about the juvenile fillies. That, of course, is a race we're very much looking forward to on Friday, October 31st. Make sure you are poised to play along with us at twinspires.com. We have a lot of tournament action this weekend, including the $1,000 Keeneland BC Clark BC qualifier coming up on Sunday. That is a qualifier for the event that's on Saturday, October 18th. So a lot to look forward to in the tournament tab. Certainly plenty of promos that Darren will be back with you on Thursday to go over in great detail. Guys, thanks again. Appreciate it taking a look back at what went on, and I'm sure we'll be looking forward to plenty more going on in the future. For James and Vance, Nick here. Until next time, best of luck.